Fight fans, welcome to the PBC podcast, brought to you by Premier Boxing Champions with your host, Kenneth Buhari and Michael Rosenthal.
Welcome everyone to the PBC podcast. I'm Kenneth Buhari.
And I'm Michael Rosenthal, editor of USA Today's Boxing Junkie.
Thank you guys, as always, for joining us. We've got another good episode for you. Undefeated IBF World Super Middleweight Champion Caleb Sweethand Plants is in the house. You don't want to miss what Plant had to say. Of course, we're going to look back at last weekend's big Super Middleweight unification bout and look ahead to Saturday night's anticipated showdown between two undefeated 122-pound champions, Louis Nery and Brandon Figueroa, live on Showtime. And in today's toe-to-toe segment, we ask, if Manny Pacquiao were to beat Errol Spence Jr. or Terrence Crawford, does he surpass Floyd Mayweather on the all-time list? Now, speaking of Mayweather, we're going to start with his press conference last week announcing his June 6th Showtime pay-per-view against Logan Paul. Tempers flared, and then in a scene that went viral, Logan's brother Jake Paul snatched Mayweather's hat off his head. It was a move that earned him a black eye, a tattered shirt, and probably a few lumps we didn't see. Mike, what did you make of all of that last week?
You know, that interaction between them will probably be more interesting than the fight itself. I thought it was entertaining, which is exactly what the organizers would have wanted. Yeah, I'm not saying it was orchestrated, but it might as well have been. It stole attention away from the Canelo-Saunders fight for a full day or more. As you mentioned, the video went viral. Jake Paul grabbing, now he's not fighting Jake Paul, he's fighting Logan Paul, but Jake Paul grabbing Mayweather's hat and then getting beat up was just hilarious. And the fact that Jake Paul seemed to think it was hilarious made it even more hilarious. Right. And then getting a gotcha hat tattoo was just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, that's so sharp. I mean, these guys really know how to market themselves. It's impressive.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You can say whatever you want about the Paul brothers. They're really good at marketing themselves. I think that's what we saw at that press conference.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, if you had any doubts whatsoever about this fight selling, look no further than what happened last week. Now, there's been a lot of backlash over Mayweather taking these exhibitions. He's taking the brunt of that backlash. Do you believe that heat is warranted?
No, honestly, I don't even get it, really. The guy has the ability to make millions, maybe tens of millions of dollars by sparring with a YouTube personality. It's like a supply and demand situation. If the people are willing to pay for it, and as you alluded to just now, a lot of people are going to pay for it, that means they want to see it. So he's giving people what they want to see. I mean, that's supply and demand. And everybody knows it's not a real boxing match. If it were, then I would be criticizing him possibly, because I didn't like the McGregor fight, for example.
I don't know if everyone knows that, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Knows what?
That it's not a real boxing match. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who are thinking like,
yeah, some people might be. Obviously, the people that follow the Paul brothers, probably think he's going to win.
Right.
But also don't forget that it's not just Mayweather. Many others have and continue to do exhibitions, from Ali to Tyson. I mean, there's all kinds of guys out there using boxing to make a buck. People who really care about boxing know the difference, obviously. And finally, Mayweather gave a lot to boxing for a lot of years. Don't you think he earned the right to make money this way? I think he does. I don't get it.
I completely agree with you. And I mean, if you can, like you said, why not? I mean, who is without a need for, $50 more million cast the first stone. If someone came up to you just like, hey, you want to spar this guy or in our profession, for instance, someone say, hey, you want to write this article for 50 million, this little Dr. Seuss book or whatever, I'll take it. And I'm sure everybody else will. So I don't understand what the big deal is. But enough of the hot takes. We'll have more on Mayweather in the toe-to-toe section. But let's move on to the PBC fight of the week. This Saturday, May 15th, we've got one of the best matchups of 2021, if not the best. A battle of two undefeated champions in one of the best divisions in the sport. 122-pound world champions Louis Nery and Brandon Figueroa face off in the Showtime Championship Boxing headliner. Again, that's Saturday beginning at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and we'll begin here with the essentials.
Okay, here we go. Nery 31-0, 24 knockouts. Figueroa 21-0-1 with 16 knockouts. Obviously, Nery's 5-0 in his last 5 with 4 knockouts. Figueroa 4-0-1 with 4 knockouts. Nery's last fight was Aaron Alameda, unanimous decision in September. He won his title in that fight. Figueroa last fought Damian Vasquez, stopped him in 10 on the same card that Nery fought Alameda. Nery 77% knockout percentage, 73% for Figueroa. Nery 142 rounds in his career, 116 for Figueroa. Young guys, Nery's 26, Figueroa 24. Nery turned pro 2012, Figueroa 2015. Nery is a southpaw. Figueroa fights from an orthodox stance. Figueroa will have an advantage here. Nery's 5'6", Figueroa 5'9". Big reach advantage for Figueroa. 66.5 for Nery, 72 for Figueroa. Nery's from Tijuana, Baja California in Mexico, and Figueroa's from West Laco, Texas.
Man, listening to you talk about the reach advantage, the height advantage. Of course, Figueroa likes to bang on the inside.
Yes, so it doesn't really matter that much.
Right, I'm not sure it matters. But I mean, the KO percentages. This sounds like it's going to be a war. We had another war earlier this year in this same division when Angelo Leo fought Stephen Fulton, which of course Fulton won by decision. Let's have some perspective here. In your opinion, is the 122-pound division the hottest in the sport?
Well, it's one of the hottest. It's a good division. I think Stephen Fulton is the man to beat at super bantamweight, but Nery and Figueroa are right there. Murajan Akhmadaliev holds 2 of the major titles. Daniel Roman's knocking on the door. And we're not even talking about guys at 118 who might be moving up soon. So there's all kinds of action in this division. It's a fun division.
Yeah, for sure. And this is Nery's second fight at 122 pounds. You mentioned the decision he won over Alan Alameda in his first fight there last September. Surprisingly close fight. Nery was known as a power puncher. I mean, one of the best fighters in the world when he fought at 118. Is he the same guy at 122?
I think that's hard to say. He outpointed Alameda to win his title in what really was his first fight as a full-fledged 122-pounder. But as you said, I didn't think he looked that good, at least not as good as he had at 118. He's good enough to win the fight, but he wasn't as explosive or as powerful as he had been in his previous fights. Something was off. Maybe it's just a process of transitioning. Maybe Alameda was just better than I thought he was and what a lot of people thought he was. I think we'll learn more about Nery,
Sure.
Nery's adjustment to the weight in the fight against Figueroa.
Yes, certainly. And Figueroa is a big 122-pounder. He's basically bulldozed everyone that he's faced. But this is a huge step up against an accomplished champion in Nery. Is this too big a step up for Figueroa?
I don't think it is. I think Nery has most of the advantages on paper. He's quicker, probably a better boxer, probably punches harder, although I guess that's still in question. That could end up being the difference in the fight. But that said, I think Figueroa's toughness, his durability, I mean, the guy's just like indestructible. And his determination makes him a tough out for pretty much anyone. He's going to just continue to come at you no matter what you do until you force him to stop. And that hasn't happened yet, but maybe Nery's the guy who can do that.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be hit too many times by Louis Nery. Now, getting back to that Alameda fight, that was his first and only, talking about Nery, his only bout with renowned trainer Eddie Reynoso. He's since gone back to his old trainer, Israel Ramirez. Is Nery leaving Reynoso and returning to Israel Ramirez the right or the wrong move, good or bad? What's your take on that?
Well, that's tough to say from the outside, which is where I am, but maybe his performance had something to do with the fact that he wasn't 100% comfortable with Reynoso. That's always a possibility. I mean, I'll say this very generally. Not every trainer is right for every fighter, even if we're talking about a guy like Reynoso. Maybe the chemistry just isn't perfect. Another possibility. Maybe Reynoso is working with too many guys for Nery's taste. Maybe he wants more one-on-one attention that Reynoso than Reynoso can give him at this point. I don't know. And finally, maybe he just realized he's more comfortable with Ramirez. Sometimes you come up with a guy that you trust, you're comfortable with him, you've been with him for a long time, it just works. So maybe he just came to that realization.
Yeah, and I mean, he certainly didn't look like the same fighter under Reynoso. Maybe that, had something to do with it. We'll see on Saturday night, but it is time for the moment of truth. Mike, who are you picking?
Well, I really like Figueroa. Actually, he's one of my favorite fighters, to be honest. I think he's as tough as anyone in boxing, pound for pound. And his skills probably are underappreciated. I think he's better than maybe most people assume. But, yes, there's a but. I think Nery is more of a thoroughbred. I like that word. Naturally more talented guy who can box better than Figueroa. And again, probably can punch harder in the end. I think Nery will probably end up using his feet to stay out of the trenches, which is where Figueroa wants the fight to take place. And maybe he picks Figueroa apart to some degree. It's not going to be easy for Nery for the reasons that I stated, but I think he'll gradually wear Figueroa down and either stop him late or win a clear decision. I have a feeling it's going to be next to impossible to take out Figueroa, so probably a decision.
Yeah, it's one of those deals where we don't know how much power Nery's bringing to the table at 118. Maybe he hasn't at 122. Maybe he hadn't settled in to the division when he fought Alameda, because the power didn't seem quite the same. But then again, as you mentioned, maybe Alameda is just that good a fighter. Now, that said, I'm going with the upset. I like Brandon Figueroa to surprise everybody and stop Luis Nery late in the fight. I think a lot depends on whether or not he can take the punch, if he can take Nery's shot. But from what I've seen so far, he's just the better fighter at 122. Not to mention, I've got a 2-game lead in the prediction league, so I'm playing with house money.
There you go.
So I can afford to take the risk here. But I really do believe in Figueroa's chances. We discussed this a few weeks ago, and I said, I'm kind of leaning toward Figueroa, and I still am, and I'm just going to go with my gut here. I think he pulls off the surprise in what's a great fight. And if he doesn't, then I'm calling out sick next week. But we'll see what happens with that fight. Now, on the undercard, former unified super bantamweight world champion Danny Roman is back against Ricardo Espinoza Franco. Roman, of course, has his eyes on the winner and another shot at a world title. And also in the televised opener, undefeated rising star Xavier Martinez meets former world title challenger Juan Carlos Burgos. That's a WBA super featherweight title eliminator. Big fight. Again, the action begins at 9 p.m. Eastern time.
When unbeaten champions collide.
This is not a fight for the faint of heart.
Expect all action. A fearless attack to win at any cost. And a fight destined to be an all-out war.
I am the end. Toe-to-toe we go.
Luis Nery and Brandon Figueroa clash for the world title.
This action is going to be en fuego. This is the end.
On Showtime.
All right, it's time for the week in review. Last week we had a pretty big unification bout as WBA and WBC super middleweight champion Canelo Alvarez took on WBO titleist Billy Joe Saunders. 73,000 at Cowboy Stadium, most to see Canelo do his thing, and the man obliged, forcing Saunders to retire on a stool after a counter right uppercut in the 8th apparently broke Saunders' right orbital bone. A lot of controversy surrounding whether Saunders quit. Mike, what was your take on how the fight ended?
Well, first, I believe it was his trainer's decision. So let's get that out of the way. It wasn't as if he quit. Second, I support the trainer's decision. We talk about fighters going out on their shields, which is admirable in theory, and sometimes we actually see it. Here's the thing though. He couldn't see out of the eye. And his trainer, this is really the key part, and his trainer used the term caved in to describe his eye socket. even Canelo said that it would have been too risky to continue for Saunders to continue fighting. Imagine if he lost his eye or worse than that. There would have been a storm of criticism that he was allowed to continue. So I think Saunders' trainer made the exact right decision.
Now, what about folks saying he quit? I mean, we're hearing that a lot.
Well, fighters should be given the chance to win fights and leeway to demonstrate their bravery, but it's the job of their handlers and officials to protect them from themselves. Sometimes I think that's what Sanders' trainer did. But speaking generally about, and I'll address the quitting part of it, I think it's okay for a guy to quote unquote go out on his shield if he's buzzed or he's tired or has a cut that won't cause long-term damage, the kind where he or she could lose an eye or something like that. Yeah. I don't think it's appropriate to allow a fight to continue when a fighter has taken, or even a fighter should even choose to continue when he's taken just a crazy amount of punishment, regardless of whether he's fighting back or he has a serious injury that can be exacerbated if the fight continues. And I think Saunders falls, into that last category. He had a serious injury that really could have caused him major lifelong problems had the fight continued. I think it would have been crazy to continue.
Yeah, I can't call a fighter a quitter. I've never boxed professionally. Sometimes. I'm just not in a position to do. I'm just not in a position to do so. I just won't. I mean, obviously, I have some thoughts, particularly with this situation. I mean, I hope Saunders gets better. Quite frankly, it's hard to sympathize with them because I remember what happened when Daniel Dubois fought Joe Joyce, and of course, Dubois suffered what I believe was a similar injury. And he also retired on his stool or just retired. And Billy Joe gave him hell. Said, I'd rather die. He's got a lot to answer for. He should have went out on his shield, blah, 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 blah. So in general, he's just not an easy person to sympathize with. And I think that may be part of the problem as far as, how fans perceive him and why he's catching hell, right now. In your opinion, can Saunders come back from this?
Well, other fighters, including Cal Brook, he's the first one that comes to mind, have come back from that injury. Now, it's hard to compare injuries because you don't really know, at least I don't know what the severity of the injuries are compared to one another. Eddie Hearn, for what it's worth, said he had multiple fractures in his cheek. So did Saunders, actually. He said that on social media. So I guess, to answer your question, excuse me, I would guess that he'll be back, but who knows? It depends on how bad it was in the healing process, right? I think he'll probably be back, but we'll see.
Now, I don't know if you caught the post fight. But
I did.
Demetrius Andre, the WBO the WBO middleweight champion, popped up and asked for a fight with Canelo, and of course drama ensued, and Canelo cursed him out and basically told him, beat it, that he hadn't fought anyone. What were your thoughts on Andre interrupting the presser?
Well, honestly, I didn't have too many thoughts at all. I thought it was rude, but I don't have a big problem with it. It's sort of a tradition in boxing. The master of that was Shannon Briggs, who basically showed up at every presser Vladimir Klitschko ever had in his whole career. In his reaction to what Andre was doing and saying, even Canelo said he understands that Andre is just trying to get a payday. I personally find that kind of behavior obnoxious, but I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Yeah, I remember when Antonio Tarver showed up at I don't remember, I saw. And when Antonio Tarver showed up at the press conference following Roy Jones's victory over John Ruiz, and he was like, give me a shot. I want my shot. And we all know what happened there. I don't think that's quite the case here. And, it's unfortunate for Demetrius Andre that he's in the position that he's in right now. I did think it was kind of shady of his promoter to sort of poo-poo him or tell him to beat it. Basically, when that's your fighter, you should be pulling for him to get a shot. But unfortunately, that's the situation that Andre has put himself in. So not much you can really do about that. Let's talk about Canelo. It's another performance, another world title. Is this man the best fighter in the world?
Yeah, I'm going to pretty much always have the same answer to that question. No, he's not. And to be honest, and I don't, again, I'm going to preface everything I say about Canelo. I think he's a great fighter, first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the best fighters Mexico's ever produced. But no, he's not the best fighter in the world. And I'm more convinced of that after what I saw on Saturday. I have him number 2 on my pound for pound top 10, and I'm not even sure he deserves to be that high. No, he's a top 2 or 3 guy, 4, maybe 4. I think Spence might be better than him. I think Inoue might be better than him. I think the Charlos might be as good or better than him. I think Saunders gave Canelo all kinds of problems, even though Saunders can't crack an egg. Canelo, to me, looked frustrated as late as early in the 8th round, like right before that punch landed. And I thought the result was still up in the air. I had Canelo winning, but some people I respect, people I know boxing, had Saunders ahead at that point. I have to give Canelo credit. Listen, he landed the big punch. That's his goal, and ended the fight around the time that he said he would do it. So, kudos to him. He did exactly what he set out to do. He's a great fighter. I just think he's just a tad overrated, and I'm not sure anything's going to change that. Maybe if he fights all these guys out there and beats them all, I'll have a different opinion. But I don't think he's quite as good as some people think he is.
Yeah, it's interesting. Watching the fight, yes, the stoppage was impressive. However, I did see some flaws, and it's not like I hadn't seen them before, but I was just reminded of them. His stamina, which I think sometimes is an issue, and also his ability or lack thereof to deal with movers. Sure, he did a great job with Billy Joe Saunders. I don't care what anyone says. Billy Joe Saunders is not slick. He's not as good as he was hyped up to be. He hasn't been that good in many, many years, and he's yet to beat a top fighter. Now, that said, Canelo did what he had to do, and he clearly beat him and stopped him. But I did see little things that made me wonder, I wonder what a fighter better than Saunders would do against Canelo, which leads to my next question. Who would you like to see Canelo face next?
Well, I would be happy to see him fight Caleb Plant, which is what I believe both fighters want. We'll see how that plays out, but it seems like that might happen in September. Then we'll have the undisputed champion thing out of the way. I've written and I've said that, in my opinion, Canelo's putting too much emphasis on titles, but that'll be out of the way. Whatever happens in that fight. Now, if you want me to tell you, if I get to choose who he fights next, I think somebody said, okay, you get to choose who he fights next. And I'm not going to include light heavyweights. Just take that out of the equation. I'd say Jermall Charlo. I think it'd be a terrific fight, and I think Charlo would have a good chance of winning that fight. That's the fight for me. There's several that I would like, but that's number 1. For the record, I think Plant has a chance to beat Canelo. I think he's better than Saunders, although Saunders did have the advantage of being a southpaw. That's one thing that Plant doesn't have. But I think overall Plant's better than Saunders, and we saw what Saunders did against Canelo. Gave him problems.
Yeah, and I think that does bode well for Plant, who I think is a better fighter at 168 than Billy Joe Saunders, without question. And I agree with you regarding Jermall Charlo. I think he has the athleticism to move and box and give Canelo serious problems. Lest we forget, Danny Jacobs gave Canelo a lot of problems doing that, and that turned out to be a closer fight than many anticipated. So I like Charlo. Plus, he's got the heart. He could take a punch. He's got the power. He's not afraid to get in there. So I really like that fight. I hope to see it soon, and of course I hope to see Canelo back in the ring, and I'm hopeful that his next fight is what he says, against the IBF champion Caleb Plant. It's time to bring in this week's guest, one of the biggest names in the sport right now, and it's only going to get bigger from here on out, the undefeated IBF World Super Middleweight Champion, Sweet Hands, Caleb Plant. Caleb, how are you doing? How is your hand doing? How is everything in general?
Everything's going well. My hand's healing up, and I'm sure there'll be no issues moving forward. Training's going well, and I'm locked in.
You've been the talk of the town since Saturday night when Canelo Alvarez beat Billy Joe Saunders. What were your thoughts on that fight?
We watched it. I didn't go because I went back home to see my grandparents for Mother's Day and stuff like that. But we did watch it, and Canelo did his thing and got the job done. It seemed like Billy started to settle in around the 5th round and, kind of started dictating the pace and, having some success. But, in the end, he got caught with a big shot, and, that was all she wrote. So.
Caleb, there's been a lot of talk about Saunders quitting, just quitting in general. As a fighter, from your perspective, what was your take on that?
It's easy to quickly judge someone in the ring, and feel like they quit. And, later I guess it came out that his orbital bone was broke. So, I've never had that done to me, so I'm not sure what it feels like. So, I'd hate to call him a quitter, but, I don't know. I don't really focus on that. I'm focused on me and myself and what I have to do to get the job done is to win. So, sitting on the sidelines calling somebody a quitter, that's not my style.
Got it. What was your take on Canelo's performance in general? Did you see things in there that you believe you could take advantage of?
Yeah, I did. I think things I feel like I could take advantage of and some mistakes or just some weak spots that I feel like that I could capitalize on. And, here soon when we get that fight signed and, I can show you on person. So.
Were you less or more impressed with Canelo after watching that fight on Saturday?
Not either. I know Canelo, he's a good fighter, but, at the end of the day, like I said, I just feel like I'm the better fighter. I feel like that I have more attributes. I know he has a lot of experience, but sometimes experience can be overrated. And I feel like I got the heart and the mind, the skills, and just the full package to, go in there and do what has to be done. So.
What do you believe you can do that Saunders wasn't able to?
Well, for one, I feel like, I take this sport a lot more serious. We've heard Saunders even, telling himself, saying that he doesn't train when he doesn't have fights coming up, and, that maybe he doesn't live the best lifestyle. And anyone who knows me knows how serious I take my training. They know how disciplined I am. They know how much I respect this sport and how much work that I put in this sport. So, I feel like that's a big difference maker. On top of, I feel, I'm a lot faster than Billy Joe. My defense is a lot better. I punch harder than Billy Joe. I'm taller than Billy Joe. I feel like people sometimes misconstrue that just because maybe we both have a slick style that they think that we fight the same, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we fight the same. He doesn't have a good jab. There's a whole list of things I feel like I do better. So.
After the fight, Canelo basically said he's coming for you. It's clear you're laser focused on getting this fight, but he does have the leverage. Do you think he's serious, 100% serious about wanting to fight you?
I can't speak for him, but, that has been a dream of mine to become the first undisputed super middleweight of all time. And it's been a dream of mine to chase greatness. And, if we can sit down and get it worked out, then, I think that the fans deserve that fight, and it's something that we should give them. But
obviously, that fight is enormous if it's made. How would you approach the build-up? Some guys choose to be respectful, other guys talk trash. How do you see that playing out?
I'm not sure. Sometimes whatever I feel in the moment, that's what I go with. Sometimes in the ring, you may see me make a move and look out to the crowd or and things like that. So if it's something I feel in the moment, I'm going to say it. I'm not going to shy away from it. So, we'll have to wait and see. People have to tune in. But, I can guarantee that the lead up to that fight will be fireworks. And then when that bell rings, it'll be fireworks too.
Right. Canelo showed us that he could do a little bit of trash talk, and he did it in English, for this fight, really, I think, for the first time. Does his speaking English, do you think, help market the fight? And along the same lines, do you see yourself maybe getting under his skin?
Yeah, obviously, if he's able to speak English and, the fight's over here and there's a lot of, American fans tuned in, it's going to give them something to hear and think about and remember. And, him, he can talk trash. Everyone knows I can talk trash. And, when it's time to put my game face on, I take the sport very serious. And I feel like anybody between me and what I'm trying to accomplish, or me and my goals, my dreams. I take that personal. So he's someone who's in the way of that. And so I feel like when we get in front of each other, we might, we're going to have to agree to disagree.
A fight versus Canelo can only increase your name recognition. For those who might first get to know you over the course of this promotion, what do you want them to know about Caleb Plant?
Just somebody who is chasing greatness and chasing legacy, and somebody who's given their all to this sport, who sacrificed everything for this sport and dedicated their whole life for this sport, and somebody who when me and Canelo Alvarez fight, I'm getting my hand raised, and that's all there is to it.
Your team typically handles negotiations in private. How do you respond to public negotiations and the possibility a narrative be made to make you look bad?
I'm not sure. I let my team handle my end of the bargain, and you can't control what other people say and what they do. So at the end of the day, I feel like I've been consistent enough in my character and carried myself in a manner where other people know who I am and what I am. And those who do know, they know. And the ones who don't, they don't matter.
So this actually isn't the first time a Canelo fight's been discussed. There were some people who made it seem like you were avoiding the fight at one time. Can you tell us your side of the story of that?
Yeah, I guess I was never sent an official offer or any money to decline or trying to price myself out or anything like that. They just brought it to my attention that they did get a call, but it was 5 weeks away. And that's 4 training weeks. And, for a fight of that magnitude and a fight of, that level, I feel like that deserves an 8-week camp. And, I'm not someone like Yildirim or someone like that who doesn't have a world title. I'm a world-class fighter. And I demand world-class respect, and that's an 8-week camp. And if he's the pound-for-pound best, and he feels like he's the best in the world, then why would he not, allow for it to be an even playing field and us both have 8 weeks? He knew when that day was, and he knew when he'd be fighting, and they didn't release it to anybody else until, X amount of time. And, it's just little things like that in boxing that people do that, if you feel like you're the best, then you don't have to do that. I've never tried to give somebody a short notice, camp or anything like that. So if you feel like the best, why do you got to give somebody a short notice? So, but as far as like out pricing myself or turning the fight down, David Benavidez publicly said that he wouldn't take that fight either on 5 weeks notice, and a lot of other world class fighters said the same thing. So if Eddie Hearn was to sell out his fighters like Callum Smith, for just a little bit of money like that, then that's on them.
Got it. Let's say for a second the Canelo fight doesn't happen for whatever reason. Is there somebody else in mind that you'd like to fight or a direction you'd want to go?
Right now I'm just focused on that. That's been my main goal, is to become undisputed. So right now I'm focused on that, and I'm sure that we can get that fight made for the fans.
What excites you more, the opportunity to be undisputed or the opportunity to beat a fighter considered a modern day legend?
Well, I feel like with this fight right here, you can knock out 2 birds with 1 stone. Fight a modern day legend and become undisputed. So at that point, that's all out. Everything that I've ever wanted out of boxing, I could obtain in one night. So like I said, that's where I'm focused. That's where my odds are set. And if we can get the fight made, great. And if not, I know there's a lot of other great fighters out there that that we can make a fight with. I'm only 21-0. I'm still young in this sport, and so there's still a lot for me to achieve, and that's why I'm so focused and locked in. But definitely being able to become undisputed and fight a modern day legend, Canelo, that's what we're shooting for.
One fighter who mentioned your name for a potential bout was Danny Jacobs on the recent Last Stand podcast. what would be your response to him?
I mean, I'm sure he does. He's a super middleweight. He's not a world champion, and I am. So that's his job to want to fight me. But that's a tall order for somebody who couldn't even beat Gabriel Rosado. So he might want to think that over twice.
Okay. Getting back to the Canelo fight, we've talked about how big the fight would be. How big would a win be, a victory be for you in your career?
Over Canelo?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, monumental. This is something I've worked my whole life for. So, I know in my heart that I can win, and no matter who tells me different, they're not going to be able to persuade me. I've been told my whole life, what I can and what I can't be, what I can and what I can't achieve, and so far they've all been wrong. And after everything that I've been through and overcome and conquered, if they were in my shoes, they'd feel the same way. If they were able to conquer and accomplish all the things that I have, they'd feel like that they was unstoppable too. So, to get that fight, and when we get that fight, I will get my hand raised. And it'll be a great night and a great victory. And it'll cement my name, in stone in the history books of boxing forever.
Now, if we could step back and sort of look at the big picture, do you think about what you want to accomplish in boxing before all is said and done?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, since a kid, just, it wasn't, the goal to become a world champion. I always say it was just a goal to become a world champion. The goal is to become undisputed, to be a pound-for-pound great, to be an all-time great, and, like I said earlier, to submit my name in the history books of boxing forever and, accomplish stuff that can't be erased and can't be forgotten. And I think that's what keeps me focused and locked in, even after becoming a world champion and defending my world title, a couple of times. To still be disciplined and as focused as I am is because, like I said, it wasn't the goal to become world champion. It was just a goal, and I have so much more that I want to accomplish. And as of now, I'm far away from those things. So I still got to keep my foot on the neck. I still got to keep my foot on the gas and, keep my head down and keep working.
Fantastic. Caleb, we know you got a lot going on. You're busy. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate you.
When unbeaten champions collide,
This is not a fight for the faint of heart.
expect all action. A fearless attack to win at any cost.
Oh!
And a fight destined to be an all-out war.
I am the end. Toe-to-toe we go.
Luis Nery and Brendan Figueroa clash for the world title.
This action is going to be and fuego. This is the end.
On Showtime.
All right, it's time for Mike and I to go toe to toe, and you know what time it is. We've got a good one for you this week. The question is, if Manny Pacquiao were to beat Errol Spence Jr. or Terrence Crawford, would he surpass Floyd Mayweather on the all-time list? Mike, floor is yours.
No, he would not. He could beat both of them, and the answer would still be no. Don't get me wrong. I hate to preface everything, but I want to be clear where I'm coming from. I love Pacquiao and appreciate everything he's accomplished in the sport. He's a freaking legend. I used to really love watching Pacquiao fight when he was in his prime, and even now. He just was, is, and never will be better than Floyd Mayweather, even on his best day. It's like the pound for pound thing. Maybe you could argue Pacquiao has more victories over big name opponents than Mayweather, but Mayweather has plenty of those too. And Mayweather wins the eye test competition. I don't necessarily hold losses against a fighter. If I did, then guys like Sugar Ray Robinson and Sugar Ray Leonard wouldn't be at the top of my all-time pound-for-pound list. Pacquiao has lost 7 times, though, and Mayweather went undefeated. You can't completely ignore that. I mean, nobody ever beat Mayweather. And finally, Mayweather beat Pacquiao head-to-head, even though Mayweather was probably farther past his prime than Pacquiao was. Maybe they were even on that account, but he did beat him head-to-head. Again, love Pacquiao. He's just not as good as Mayweather.
Yeah, and the reality is that if Manny Pacquiao were to beat Errol Spence or Terrence Crawford, that only enhances Floyd Mayweather's legacy. I mean, after all,
yeah,
he's the one that beat Manny Pacquiao. And a lot of people, when Pacquiao and Mayweather first fought, were saying, "Oh, Floyd waited until Manny got old." I don't know what that means. If you ask me, I think Floyd is on the age scale. He's actually higher up than Pacquiao. Meaning that if you compare the two in their primes, Floyd is further removed in my opinion. But more importantly, what further proof do we need that no, it's not a question of Pacquiao getting old. He beat Keith Thurman already, and if he were to beat Errol Spence or Terrence Crawford, then you can't use that argument to knock Mayweather's victory over Pacquiao. And again, that's the Mayweather's victory over Pacquiao is the biggest win that either one has on their resume. And so, I don't see a situation where Pacquiao could surpass him unless he got Floyd in the ring again and somehow beat him. And even then, I think it would be pretty tough because, Floyd's past his prime. That narrative gets turned on those who seek to use it. Of course, folks still say that, Mayweather waited too long. What do you think, Mike, in your opinion, if they had fought 5 years before they fought, let's say in 2010, when there was all that hype, when Pacquiao had knocked off Cotto, Mayweather had whitewashed Juan Manuel Marquez, what do you think would have happened if they had faced and fought each other next?
Real quick for the record, I'm not critical of Mayweather's victory over Pacquiao. I'm critical of both of them for allowing it to go that long before they fought. I mean, they just fought each other too late. I think, which lead me back to your question. What would have happened if they would have fought in 2010 when they were both so hot? That would have been Pacquiao's best chance. Obviously, I think that's a different Pacquiao. That's a Pacquiao that doesn't have to fight in spurts as he started to do later in his career. And he was a high volume puncher, and as quick as he is now, he was probably quicker then. I think he would have given Mayweather all kinds of problems, but I'm going to go back to what I said before. I think both of them on their best day, I think Mayweather's just a better fighter. Pacquiao's an all-time great. Mayweather's just a little greater.
Yeah, he is. And look, Mayweather's not Benjamin Button, guys. If they fought in 2010, Mayweather would be significantly younger as well. And again, I keep going back to this because I strongly believe that the Mayweather that fought Pacquiao in 2015 was further removed from his prime than the Pacquiao who fought Mayweather in 2000.
That's what I said too.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question. I think that if they had fought in 2010, Mayweather had just too many tricks up his sleeve that Pacquiao learned from that knockout loss to Marquez in 2012 and was a little more crafty, a little more careful. That would not have been the case against Mayweather, and that would have come back to hurt him. I could see him running boom into a right hand. One of the most interesting things about the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight in 2015, which to me showed me the incredible boxing brain of Floyd Mayweather, was that if you watch in the first round, he somehow maneuvered Pacquiao, just lured Pacquiao into the same position, the same part of the ring where Marquez had knocked Pacquiao out. He lured him in to the same part of the ring and caused Pacquiao to make the same move that he made against Marquez, made him commit, made him do the same move and lined him up for a right hand. And Pacquiao, almost 3/4 of the way to walking into that right hand, realized what was happening and sort of semi-stopped and took a lot of heat off of that blow. And I just thought to myself, oh my goodness, this guy, fooled a master in Manny Pacquiao into getting caught in that same position in round one. In round one of their fight, he was lining him up for that same shot that had knocked him out and set him up for it. I mean, Floyd Mayweather, too smart, too powerful, too fast, just too much of everything, and Mike, in my opinion, still underrated. As great as he's considered, I don't know if we fully appreciate everything that he's done.
Well, I appreciate it. It's pretty clear to me how good Mayweather was, especially at his best. The thing about that fight in 2010, it really would have been amazing to see that fight at that time.
Yeah, sure would have.
Because of just both guys were still, relatively young. They were so hot, vying for pound supremacy. It would have been just amazing. And when I think back on the fact that it took 5 more years for the fight to happen, it's just a little bit. Depressing is a strong word, but it's a little bit sad because we never really saw the fight when it should have taken place.
Yeah, and that's not to knock the 2015 fight. Look, I mean, both of them were still pound for pound. Floyd was number 1. I think Pacquiao was number 3. But at that time, like you said, they were in their primes, 1 and 2, no question, 1A and 1B, however you wanted to put them. But let me ask you this, though. I think in 2010 that they were guaranteed around 25 million or 50 million to fight each other. 5 years later, they made hundreds and millions of dollars for that fight. So were they right or were they wrong to wait that long?
Well, they couldn't have known what was going to happen 5 years later, but that could have also been the rematch or something along those lines. That could have been a second fight. You make all that money. It's interesting that the difference in the purses in 5 years, isn't it? But obviously they couldn't have known what was coming. 25. I don't think that what was the problem there was just all this crazy back and forth. It's a little bit like the Fury Joshua thing. Well, yeah, you're right. The drug test.
It was the drug test. Ultimately, that's what fell apart. It's kind of crazy in retrospect that was an issue. That was an issue back then. I remember it was let the commission do their job. Let their commission do their job. That's what everybody was parroting at the time. Although Pacquiao had a $10 million clause in case Mayweather did not make weight. No one said let the commission do their job when it came to that. Even though the commission has their own penalties for fighters not making weight. But what's crazy is that back then, that kind of drug testing was just unheard of. And now it should be the norm, or a lot more people are screaming for it to be the norm. So funny how things work out. Who knows what really was the reason? I mean, that might have just been used to curtail the fight, but certainly that was the conversation at that time. By the way, how would you feel if Manny fought an Errol or a Terrence Crawford now?
Well, I'd be watching as a fan. I mean, forget about what I do for a living. I'd be watching as a fan and be curious to see. I wrote Manny off before the Thurman fight, and look what happened in that fight. But I'll be honest, I would fear for Manny if he fought one of those guys. It's been 2 years will have been 2 years since the Thurman fight. He's in his early 40s. Hasn't been doing much in terms of boxing. Well, I guess he trains all the time. But,
it seems like it.
Yeah, but he's been out of the ring for 2 years. These guys are absolute freaking beasts, in their primes or near their primes. I would be afraid for Pacquiao. I just keep thinking about what Pacquiao did to Oscar De La Hoya. And I just don't want, let's put it this way, I just don't want that to happen to Manny Pacquiao. And I would be afraid that that's what would happen.
Yeah, and like you said, a lot of people were afraid that was going to happen when he fought Keith Thurman. Right. But he completely fooled us. Both of us picked Thurman to win. I thought Thurman was going to stop him. I've learned my lesson when it comes to Pacquiao. He keeps himself relatively fresh, and maybe the time off helps him. Who knows? I mean, Father Time is undefeated, though. Regardless of how I feel about it, both those fights would be so huge.
Absolutely.
If they happen, and if he won, we'll probably be having this conversation again because everyone will be having the conversation. But glad we agree on this one. Until the next toe-to-toe. That's going to do it for this week's show. We want to thank Caleb Plant for taking the time to join us. One of the best fights this year is going down this weekend. Louis Nery versus Brandon Figueroa. 2 hard-hitting, undefeated 122-pound champions throwing down. That's live on Showtime beginning at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll break down the entire card next week, so make sure you check us out right here on the PBC podcast.